And Tabletop Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit organization here to bring games and to classrooms and libraries and community programs by equipping and educating the leaders on how to do that. And I am so thankful you are here with us, because that means you care about the impact of gaming. You believe that a lot of things can go into helping these educators and phenomenal community leaders make a positive impact on others. And so with that, I know that you'd be very interested in our next upcoming webinar, but of course you're very excited about today. So today we're going to be joined by Max, who is actually somebody I'm going to give a little context to. So back in the day, Max was actually my BGG Secret Santa. I know, it was crazy in an amazing way. And then we actually ended up like really getting to know each other a little bit really well via Board Game Geek and messaging back and forth. And we've just continued to talk since then. And Max is a school teacher, and I know you're going to love the things that he is going to be talking to you about. I do want to let you know about one more upcoming webinar that we're going to be doing on March 17th. Yes, that is St. Patrick's Day, but that's okay, because our presenter is over in Paris, France. And that is, we're going to be having over in Paris, who is the head of Asmodee Research. So Asmodee is the large board game producer. They're amazing. They're doing such great work. But specifically, they launched a Asmodee Research division to show the impact of gaming around the world. And so if you want to attend that, you can hop on over to tabletopalliance.org/events with another slash and sign up for that one, where you could also find this one. You don't want to miss that. But of course, Max is going to be doing a phenomenal job today, and I can't wait for you to meet him. So let's not wait any longer. I'm going to bring on Max right now. Hey, Max.
Hey, Bruce. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good. I hope I can live up to that billing.
Well, I think so. And also some context, just for all of our viewers, you and I are also both Yankee fans. I
think that's how we started, like, sending videos back and forth. I saw your Yankee icon, and I thought, let me tell this guy about my Yankee fan. Yeah, that's what connected us.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful it did. And by the way, you were an amazing Secret Santa. And so it's like a high bar to reach with that too. But I'm going to turn it over to you. How about you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, your context, and what you're doing. And then I'm going to have you just take it away with your presentation.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll start it up here for you. My experience in gaming started when I was a kid. But, my father got me into board gaming, and when video games first hit, I'm an average kid, loved Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda growing up. And I'm really a big kid. As you said, I'm a teacher, and I often ask my students, do you think I'm an adult? And they all say, yes, of course you are. And I've never felt like an adult before. I'm a big kid at heart. I'm a big kid with responsibilities, I guess. And part of, I think, what makes gaming so awesome is that there is no age limit, right? There's no age limit. And we're going to talk about gaming in the classroom today. So I guess there is a little bit of an age limit we'll talk about. I am a high school teacher, and at the beginning of every lesson, you usually try to give people one big thought. What do you want to think about in this particular webinar? So you're here, so you probably like games, right? Do you play games? Probably. Why? Why do you play games? Why do we play games? We'll get back to this here in a little bit. Why should you listen to me, though? Who am I? Who is this guy? Well, first and foremost, I'm a husband and a dad. I love my kids. I love my family. As a profession, I don't say I'm a teacher so much as I'm an edutainer. Education is one half of it, but there has to be a little bit of entertainment too, because high school students' attention spans are pretty small, and they like the show, right? And if they can get involved in the show, it makes it a lot easier to teach them. So I like to say it's edutainment in that respect. I've designed board games before, and with moderate success. One of them is going to be published here pretty soon. I'm a big gamer and all around fun guy. And three things you need to know about me. My three favorite things are eating, my family, and not using commas. And that's the worst joke you'll hear today. I promise the rest of the presentation is better than that. I hope. Let's find out. So starting off, games in school, why? Shouldn't schools be more about, the books, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic? Well, games create that sense of engagement that as educators we're looking for at all levels. My son is in middle school right now. I teach in the high school. I've known students in elementary school. Games connect everybody. And when games are done properly, they can bring every student into a lesson. I'm talking the top level students and the students who are struggling to get by. When you find a student who doesn't necessarily understand a concept, but they can understand a game and you can blend the two, that's when light bulb moments happen. And as teachers and educators, when you see the light bulb click, that is a great feeling. So games give you that sense of engagement, and they don't necessarily mean you have to do all X's and O's. And like for me, the X's and O's are the textbook, the workbook, the test. Textbook, workbook, test. And rinse, repeat, recycle. And at the point where I start getting students in high school, that formula gets played out pretty quick. The students are used to it, so a lot of teachers might end up going to it. And I'm not saying that I don't in certain instances, but if I can pull a game out and create a sense of lesson engagement using something fun, I'm all about that. Absolutely, because I think students flock to that kind of interaction where they can get out of the textbook. And for me, it allows me to use some kind of creativity as an assessment. I don't need the true and false test. I can have the students design something, podcast something, make a poster of something, make a video. And it doesn't necessarily have to be super intense or super difficult for them. Anything that gets my students thinking outside of the proverbial box, I feel like I've done something good for them. Do I do true and false sometimes? Sure, but not a lot. I would rather be a lot more creative with what I do with my kids. And it shows with the work that I get at all levels in all the different classes that I teach. Now, how did the game design class start? Because that's kind of the focus of today, right? Game design as a class, not just in any other class. So back in 2018, I was introduced to the Video Game Clubs of America. And Video Game Clubs of America focuses on the social, emotional aspect of gaming and socializing. And when I first started working with this organization, I met a gentleman named Josh Bound right there playing Super Mario Kart. Well, they turned me on to gaming in school by using a Minecraft camp. My son, who's actually behind this student named Rowan, my son went to a Minecraft camp in 2018, and I kind of got indoctrinated into this organization and all of the benefits they have for students. This was one example where they had a group of students come and learn Minecraft. They've also gone to Buffalo Wild Wings and had, fundraisers there. We've done all sorts of esports with these kids. But what it all boiled down to was their social emotional needs. And this is all pre-pandemic now. These are buzzwords now in education. But their social emotional needs of, being a part of something and connecting with other like-minded students, it just really clicked with me. And I started talking to Josh about, different classes that he teaches and that I teach. And we got into my hobbies of board gaming. And he said, well, I've written a course called History of Board Game Design. And I said, what, really? And he said, yeah, it's out in the board docs. You can check it out. It's board approved. You can teach it if you want. So I took a look at it, and it was originally a history course. The history of gaming from the ancient world into, how new advancements have created gaming. And that was cool, but it really wasn't my wheelhouse. I was a business teacher. I am a business teacher. So where did I want to go with it? I wanted to take what he started and tweak it a little, transition it to a business course. So I now teach a course that I call Business of Game Design instead of History of Game Design. And my focus is more on the design aspects, the building and prototyping of a game, and then testing it with a group to see if you have something that might be playable. My experience as a game designer, kind of works to my advantage. I designed a game called Lords of Baseball, and I kind of walk the students through the process of outlining, prototyping, testing, revising, rinse, repeat, and keep going until you find something that works. Now, because the class is only a semester, I don't get the chance to really get them through the entire process. But another one of my goals is just to expose them to different games they might not have known about. I don't have a textbook. My textbook is games. What better way to teach students about new mechanics and new genres of games than to actually get them playing games? So through my department budget, I was able to purchase a couple class sets of some easy to learn games. For example, Love Letter, Carcassonne. In Love Letter, we learn the concept of hand management and skill powers of certain cards versus others. Carcassonne, the quintessential tile laying game. Students make their own tile laying games after learning this one. For Sale, learning about multiple card auctions, because believe it or not, high school students may know what an auction is, but they've never participated in one. It's a really fun, fast game that teaches that mechanic. And then one of the quintessential gateway games to bring in multiple mechanics is Ticket to Ride. So I've had a lot of success with these and other games throughout the course of teaching this fun class. But then this year hit. As we all know, virtual learning brings with it its own challenges. And one of the big challenges that we ran into was not being able to play at the table together at the same time. So, how do we get around that? Well, I was fortunate enough that I was able to get out on the web and find some examples of free to use games that were at least similar to what I had taught, or in this case, the same. We had learned code names as a form of party game or group game, right? So we can play code names for free online. Board Game Arena has some free games. So instead of learning certain small footprint card games, we play a game called Six Nimmt. I'm still not sure how to say that word, Six Nimmt. It's a very quick card game that's easy to learn. When we talk about dice and probabilities, one of the games we play as a solo game is That's So Clever. Really fun app that the students can play on their own. They don't need to necessarily connect with another student. But if I do want them to connect, one of the games we play, another gateway game, not quite Ticket to Ride, but Settlers of Catan, has a free game called Colonists that works in a similar fashion. This I've actually found surprisingly super easy to teach in person, but in the virtual realm, this was one of the more difficult games to teach. So I've kind of modified the instruction of this a little bit, because that's what we do as educators, right? We try. If it doesn't work, we try something different. So I have kind of switched the way, the order in which these games have been played. One of the last games that I found online is a favorite of mine from last year called Cartographers. I actually thought about creating a cartographer's duplicate in Google, like a Google spreadsheet where you can just kind of fill in colors. And then my students were going to modify it, because one of our projects is to take an existing game, change it a little bit, and make it different. Not necessarily better, because one of the things I try to tell my students is that no matter what game you make, if it's the best game ever, someone will still not like it, and that's okay. Because the most popular game in the world on the Board Game Geek database might be Gloomhaven right now, but there's still 300 plus people who've rated it a 1 who don't like it. But it's the most popular game online. So if you design a game, if I say that to my students, if you design something, don't be afraid if someone doesn't like it. So when we change games, a lot of times I might not like what they've come up with, but that my personal opinion never factors into like a final grade. I'll never tell a student your idea is bad because, well, first of all, I would never tell that to a student, period. I would never kill the creativity process like that. But who am I to say what's fun and what's not fun? You know, my students can't possibly be having fun wrong if they're having fun. So throughout virtual learning, those were the biggest challenges, introducing new mechanics. The other challenge was, how do my students build prototypes and test? Because really testing games now has moved digitally, whether it's on, different online platforms or just, straight up tabletop simulators or things like that, where I'm not going to have my students, first of all, buy a product like that, but also then learn how to code. We don't have that kind of time. In the 18 weeks that we're together, I would much rather them create something on paper and use the materials they have available to them. When I first started learning prototyping, I was fortunate enough to know a little bit about Photoshop, so my prototypes had a nice look to them. But every publisher that I talked to said it doesn't matter how a prototype looks necessarily. It's how you sell it, how you pitch it, and whether there's a game there. One publisher actually told me that he had played a game on a napkin. Now, whether or not I believe that, I don't know. I like to think that, the marketing guy in me says if it looks pretty, you have a better chance of getting it in front of eyeballs, but then it better play. The prototypes that my students put together, I try to reassure them that there's no credit for artwork at all. So this particular prototype was the first, his first attempt. And you see a very basic score track where someone is working their way down the line, very similar to Candyland, but he had other built-in mechanics that this was a music trivia game, actually. And once we did our one-on-one, he was able to transform this into something that was more open world, which I think he kind of had a video game inspiration for. But, for a student who self-admittedly doesn't like a lot of his other classes, he liked this class. Again, like I said, games create engagement. And his love of music and my introduction of gaming mechanics let him do something kind of cool. So challenges in virtual learning, me not being able to help build, cut out things with the kids, really off balance by some of the benefits, where in a virtual setting, I was able to invite some of my favorite designers to come and talk to my class and really talk to me because, they're my favorite designers. It was kind of like, hey, I like your stuff. Let's talk games for an hour. So Dr. Steve Finn of Dr. Finn's Games came to talk to my students, and Jeff Horger of, multiple companies. He's worked with GMT. He's worked with Laboratory H. He's worked with Mr. B. He's known from coast to coast like butter and toast. Jason Matthews, designer of a little game called Twilight Struggle. He's going to come to my class as well. I'm really excited about that aspect of virtual learning and being able to give students the chance to talk to industry leaders, right? That's big for me. I love that. Also, I like giving them a chance to collaborate online. Not a lot of classes have done that kind of creative collaboration, where if I put two students together and say, we all drew like little random themes out of a hat, and two partners had to create something based on those themes. So if I pulled out baseball and Bruce pulled out dancing geese, we had to come up with a game about baseball and dancing geese and pitch it. We didn't necessarily have to prototype it out, but we did the outline process. So all kinds of interesting benefits to this particular class. And at the very end of last semester, I saw some really cool projects. Like I said, the open world music class. This was an interesting combat game where when I told the class that you can use pennies as little player markers, because the joke was you can buy 1,000, you can buy 100 of them for $1. He actually had in the video that he made, a giant stack. There must have been like 200 pennies. And the concept was that the die itself was like a boulder, and you roll the die to see how many boulders there were. Creativity out the wazoo. I had one student who did not speak English throughout the whole of the class, and this was the prototype that she came up with. Absolutely phenomenal. I told them that art didn't count. I was blown away at what she was capable of doing in, I think we had 3 weeks to complete our final project. Just absolutely awesome creativity. I couldn't be more proud of this group who went through virtual learning to learn about game design. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to getting back and playing, because when you think about why we play games, tying this all together, why do we play games? For some people, there's a story involved. For the open world music game, the story was creating your own band, and I think that might have been that student's goal, was to be a musical artist, and this was his way of expressing that creativity, expressing that story. For some people, it's straight up escaping the real world. I want to be a zombie for a couple minutes. I want to be the superhero. I want to be, I want to be the man. For me, it's just for the fun. I've never played a game with the sole intent to win. If I have fun, then I've already won. And if I can impart that to my students, that board games are excellent tools to increase socialization, that increases social emotional learning. They're excellent ways to express your creativity and, bring that into their lives. I feel I've done a good job then, right? So I'd love to tell you more if you have any questions. If there's questions live, would definitely like to go through that. I will tell you, at least on the screen, the two gentlemen at the top are the reigning defending Video Game Club of America Tag Team Fortnite champions. And then my son down at the bottom he's more of a tabletop gamer. So any kind of games that you want to talk about, whether it's Video Game Club or board games, I would love to do it. I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen. If you're watching this a little bit later and you want to connect, you can either shoot me an email, try to connect on Twitter or LinkedIn. I will talk games with anybody at any time, anywhere, even Bruce. So we'll get back in here and see how things are going.
Well, first of all, I just need to say thank you. And as viewers, as you can tell, like, he's doing some amazing work. And so obviously it's having a profound impact. But Max, like, seriously, thank you for that. Wow.
Thanks for having me. I said, I'll talk games for another 2 hours if you want.
Yeah, I definitely have some questions for you that I think would be helpful for all of our viewers. And by the way, if you weren't able to capture Max's information, I'm putting it in the show notes for this. So if you just scroll on down in YouTube, you can just highlight it and copy it, and you'll find it all there. One thing you mentioned, well, there's a lot of really great things you mentioned, but you really talked about this engagement, this social, emotional, right? And I think in this past year, we've seen some pretty rough stuff with students, right? And I'm curious, usually what happens is we don't only have an experience in one area, and that's the only place that impact exists. I'm curious if you've heard from any students or any other teachers of how this is maybe carried over into that student's experience in other classrooms or otherwise, if you wouldn't mind speaking into that.
How gaming has transferred into, or how the pandemic has?
Well, the gaming and this like creativity and inspiration and resilience. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just started teaching this class last year. So I had students who you would consider struggling students. Like they didn't like coming to school. They didn't do a lot of the work, and they were struggling to get by. And these are the kind of kids that, guidance counselors would get on, like, hey, listen, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to graduate. So there's a stress put on these kids because You know, a lot of times, if a student isn't planning on going to college, then they look at high school as this is the end, and why do I need to do this if my life out of high school is going to be already what it is? I have a job, or I'm going to end up working the same place my father is, things like that. So the stress that's built up in some of these other classes, that it boils over into every aspect of a student's life, home life, out of school. And high school students, believe it or not, have a lot going on in their heads. I have been out of high school now for somewhere between 60 and 150 years. So I don't know what it's like, but being there every day, I have a sense. I know where these kids' heads are. So where gaming comes in, and the whole concept of SEL, social emotional learning, if a student is given the opportunity to express themselves, and with some students it's writing poetry, with some students it's creating films or funny TikToks or whatever. Some students don't have that, and game design is something that anybody can do. I'm living proof. I am nothing special. My father came up with an interesting concept for a game, and he sent it to me, and I thought, okay. A couple months later, a friend of ours, we met we're at a convention, and a friend of mine said, "Hey Max, would you play test my tennis game?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I played it, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's great." And I had this moment, like, my dad could beat up your dad type thing. And I said, "My dad made a baseball game. You should test that next year." And Terry said, "Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, awesome." And it was at that moment, right then, I said, anybody can do this, because I had never done it before. And honestly, that summer, that fall rather, I student taught. So I was doing nothing except student teaching. My dad and I put together an outline, a prototype, and we actually tested it a couple times before the next convention. So we, as absolute amateurs, did something that a lot of people liked, and it got the attention of actual real life publishers. So I take that experience and I tell it to a student who doesn't think they have anything going for them, but when they put something on paper, I don't lie to a kid. I won't tell the kid this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. There were students last year that duplicated and invented games that they had no idea existed. For example, we talked about Carcassonne as the introduction to tile laying, like making little blocks and making a puzzle or whatever. I had a student basically recreate Galaxy Trucker. And when I showed him a video of Galaxy Trucker, he looked at that and he's like, "Wow, that looks like a really fun game." And I said, "Yeah, it's fun because that's what you've made here." And his first thought was, "Oh, am I in trouble?" I said, "Have you ever heard of Galaxy Trucker before?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, how can you be in trouble? How can you copy something that you didn't know existed?" And that's another part of board gaming that really blows these students' minds, is the fact that there's over 90,000 games in this Board Game Geek database. A lot of times designers steal from others. There's no unique mechanics anymore. It's just how you blend them together. But giving a student who may be struggling in English or history an opportunity to be creative, and then transfer that to another class where, all right, now in English class, we're learning about literature. Well, are there any board games that are also based on this literature? Maybe. And that gives them a tie-in where you can do some cross-curricular things. And anytime that a student can feel more comfortable in those classes, the stress level should go down. Whether it does or not, I guess your mileage may vary there. But if I can give a student the opportunity to, tie in something creative in my class with something else, there's a benefit for them in that class and for my class.
That's amazing. And one of the things you're really speaking into there is, I remember at the beginning of the talk, you were talking about assessment, right? And using games as an assessment tool. And when you look at assessment, a lot of times you're usually benchmarking that against like Bloom's taxonomy, like those lower levels of the knowledge retention, right? And replication. But you're really talking the highest order, and that's that creation and self actualization for like Maslow's hierarchy of stuff. And so I'm curious with that. I think a lot of people watching this are in this space of, how the heck do I even start doing this? Right? Like they might be a new gamer, or they've never done it in the classroom. Like, what would you say to somebody who's like, okay, I want to try?
That's what I'd say. Try. Like this year has been really eye opening for me, and I've such a supportive administration throughout virtual learning. They've often told us, don't be afraid to try something, and if it doesn't work, well, oh well, it doesn't work. We tried. If we all looked at something as, I don't know if I can do this, we'd all be sitting in the dark, and I'm not sure you and I would have ever met. Like when Edison made the light bulb, what they say, like I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So if anyone in education is nervous about trying something new, I would say reach out to someone in your PLC, or if you have an online, professional community, reach out to me. At the very worst, I'll give you a good pat on the back and tell you can do it, because up until the point where you give up, you're never broken, right? You're not defeated until you say I'm done. Now, as
Yeah.
far as creating a game for assessment, you might not be able to do that right off the bat. I mean, my digital assessments in game design class have been so much different from what they were in, real. I hate to say real life school, but real life school. It's something that, if you're flexible and you are willing to put the kids first, and I'm a big effort guy. I mean, I'll put that out. Like, if a student tries in business of board game design class, there's not a lot of right or wrong answers for me. If I tell a student, hey, we're going to make a dice game, and they create a card game, excuse me, yeah, there's probably something they did wrong, but I'm also going to give that student an opportunity to go back and revise and edit. I also teach accounting. Same deal. If a student does an income statement incorrectly, or their balance sheet doesn't balance, of course, I'm going to give them every opportunity to get things right, because I'm an effort guy. And I think that's just the way I am, the way I teach, the way I look at my classes. I think my classes are super important, but at the end of the day, if a student doesn't make the greatest board game of all time, I understand that life will hopefully go on, right? I look at my classes as, at least the board game design class, as a form of escape from the stresses of, state mandated tested courses, right? They haven't tested my course yet, thankfully. So if a teacher is out there in any subject matter, English, history, science, math, whatever, there are always different avenues of assessment for you than just a straight up test. I've loved seeing some of the TikTok videos I have my students make. I give them, I said, you get 60 seconds to get this concept out as crazy as you want. If you want to make a 1980s style music video with, pink bandanas and hairspray and whatever, do it. But just show me the material. I've also had students write AP level term papers. Where do I find more enjoyment? I find more enjoyment with what I consider to be out of the box type things, because students look at that and they say, well, I wonder what kind of crazy stuff Jamelli's going to come up with now. And sometimes it's basic, hey, we're going to make a comic strip, but sometimes it's crazy goofy, where I'll put 3 or 4 students together and tell them, your job is to make a TV show. You have to make a 20-minute show, and you better entertain me. And they look at me like, what do you mean we have to entertain you? Entertain me. Oh, but you better teach me about payroll too. And the stuff they come up with it's still just I marvel at their creativity. I think I have anything under control. My kids blow my mind every other day.
That's amazing. And obviously you're an inspiration to your students. I
I
love
hope.
this. Well, it's like I think you're bringing a lot out of them. I think you're willing to be there with them. It's so amazing to hear like this different stuff that they're doing. One thing, and just kind of have one more question for you, and that is, you gave some amazing different resources on some different games digitally, but I think there's also this counter narrative of I'm able to do things in person, and I know how to teach a game in person, and I feel like I might be comfortable doing that. Do you have any tips for using or introducing any of those? Because a lot of games you can only have like 4 people at a table, and
Yep.
an online ecosystem is kind of closed. So, any advice to speak into that and how to maybe facilitate that well?
So how to teach games in the virtual setting, or how to teach games in
Yeah.
person?
How to teach games in the virtual setting and help them in learning and during that class time.
Absolutely. So the biggest challenge I've found is not being able to see students' faces. Because if I'm out on, for example, That's So Clever, where the app is just you're rolling dice and you have to place them somewhere. If we're live and in living color, I can see a student. They give you that look, right? And you see you have to slow down. Whereas if I'm just talking to a little circle, I can just talk and talk because I get no natural feedback. So what I did to start was I built a little mini script, and I try not to teach for longer than 5 minutes, because that's about the length of time that you can expect a high school student to really pay attention to what's going on, even if you're learning how to play a game, right? So I try to tie things down to at most 5 minutes. And if I can't, what I'll do is I will teach the first part of the game, and then we'll play together, where we'll make moves, and when we get to a point where I need to stop, we'll reset the game. And it's okay when we're not trying to shoot for high scores right off the top. And I might have to go for another 3-4 minutes. Most of the games that we play don't require much more than that. So that's the first thing. I said Catan was probably the toughest to teach, because the website that we used is kind of streamlined to be for people who know how to play. Right, the tutorial is moderately good, but I know how to play, so it's tough for me to judge. When my students went through the tutorial, they didn't feel that it helped them. So what I figured that we needed to do was, like I said, break things down, and it's really chunking. We've done that before in other subjects. We don't throw calculus at sixth graders. We teach them the steps to get to calculus, right? So that would be the first piece of advice. And the second piece of advice I would offer is, don't, like, I'm a big game player. Like, see all the games in the back. I love board games. I like medium, heavy, light, all kinds. Don't throw all, like, everything you have at a kid right away, because you're going to overwhelm them and possibly scare them off of the hobby. So I would start small. Like, the very first game that I would teach my live and in living color students is Love Letter. There's 16 cards to it. It's not Twilight Imperium. It's not this giant table eater, right? You're not going to intimidate kids. Plus, kids are used to holding cards. Stay in the student's wheelhouse. Later on, once you get them interested, then you can throw something like Ticket to Ride at them, where, well, now they have little plastic pieces and cards and a board. And there's multiple things to consider. And in the gaming world, that's still considered a gateway game. That's not considered, a medium heavyweight game. I don't get much more complicated than Ticket to Ride or Carcassonne in that class, because my goal is for them to design something familiar to them. And none of my students, if my students have not been exposed to board games before my class, they're not going to pull out, through the ages right away. They're not going to pull out civilization right away. They're going to pull something that's more along the lines of Monopoly, where you roll dice and move, because that's how they're going to grow. So that's what I would say. Scaffold, chunk your instruction and start super small. Even and that goes live in living color or online.
So it sounds scaffold not only the content, but also scaffold the games,
Yeah.
but have reasonable expectations of what level of games they're going to be getting to, right? So
I would
understanding
agree with
that.
that.
Yeah. So Max, I cannot thank you enough for sharing some of these super impactful lessons and also all the great work you have and continue to do. Your school district is very lucky to have you. Video Game USA is they're very lucky to have you. Any kind of last little words as we close out right here?
The only word in the Webster Merriam Dictionary that's spelled incorrectly is incorrectly. Thank you for having me. Really, I appreciate being out there. I love preaching the word of VGC USA and game design and classes. Like guys, this is my wheelhouse. I could do this all day.
Yeah. And Max, I thank you for everything, all the conversations you and I have also had and are going to continue to have. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be a long thing. But that being said, viewers, thank you so much for watching this. If you are interested in learning more about any of the things Max was talking about or reaching out to him, just scroll on down, copy that email right there. There's also a link for Video Game Clubs USA. If you want to learn more about Tabletop Alliance, you go to tabletopalliance.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit located in Texas, but we're helping support people like Max in education sectors, but also in community programs. And so if you want us to support you, please feel free to reach out to me as well. So Bruce at tabletopalliance.org. And Max, again, thank you so much. And hope continue to do great things. And I'll see y'all next time. And stay tuned for our next video.